Future Self-Talk. How Connecting with Who You'll Become Transforms Who You Are Today. By David Russo. Chapter 1, Meeting the Future You. Imagine for a moment that you could step outside of your present life and meet yourself 5, 10, or even 20 years from now. This version of you is calmer, wiser, and more confident. They have faced challenges that feel overwhelming today and have come out stronger, not by accident, but through consistent choices and intentional living. Meeting your future self isn't science fiction, it's a practice that can fundamentally transform the way you make decisions, respond to stress, and pursue goals right now. Think of your future self as a mentor who already knows the outcome of your current struggles. Unlike external advisors, this mentor is intimately familiar with your thoughts, fears, and patterns. They aren't here to lecture or judge, they're here to guide. And the most incredible part? You can start the conversation anytime. Consider a common scenario: you're tempted to skip a workout, convinced you'll start tomorrow. In this moment, your present self sees only the discomfort, the immediate inconvenience. But your future self, the one who has built a body that feels strong and resilient, can speak directly to that impulse. I know today feels hard. I get it. But skipping this session isn't just about exercise, it's about the habits that shape your life. I promise you, 10 years from now, you'll thank yourself for showing up today. It's the small, consistent choices that add up to freedom, health, and confidence. Even this short dialogue reframes the present. Suddenly, the choice is no longer about resisting temporary discomfort, it's about aligning with the person you're committed to becoming. By turning toward your future self in moments of doubt, you activate a powerful motivational force, a version of you that sees beyond instant gratification and cares deeply about long-term fulfillment. So how does this work in practical terms? Begin by closing your eyes and visualizing yourself 10 years from now. What does this future you look like? What habits do they maintain? How do they handle stress, relationships, and opportunities? Allow yourself to really feel their presence. Imagine their voice, their tone, even their energy. Then, ask one question: what should I do today to make life easier for you tomorrow? Wait. Listen. The answer may come as a thought, a feeling, or a sudden insight. That's your future self speaking. Here's another brief exchange to illustrate. Present you: I feel stuck in my career. I don't know if I should quit my job and start my own business. Future you: I understand the fear, it's normal. But remember, your future self values calculated risk over hesitation. Start small. Test your ideas while keeping a safety net. You don't have to leap blindly, you have to act wisely. Present you: so, I shouldn't just quit tomorrow. Future you: not yet. But you should start building the foundation today. Take steps that your future self will thank you for: research, network, learn. These are the invisible investments that pay off later. Notice how the conversation shifts perspective. It's no longer about panic or instant solutions, it's about alignment and strategy. Over time, these dialogues reshape your thinking patterns, influence your behavior, and gradually narrow the gap between who you are today and who you could become. Meeting your future self may feel strange at first. You might even encounter resistance, the voice of your present self insisting this is silly or impossible. That's normal. Our brains are wired to focus on the immediate, not the distant. But the more you practice, the more vivid and persuasive your future self becomes. Eventually, this practice won't just be a visualization exercise, it will become an internal compass, guiding your decisions, habits, and mindset every single day. By the end of this chapter, the goal is simple: you won't just understand your future self intellectually. You'll feel them. You'll sense their perspective and, most importantly, begin to act in ways that make your future self proud. Today is the first conversation. Tomorrow, it becomes a habit. And the life you've always wanted begins to feel not only possible but inevitable. Chapter 2, The Science of Future Self-Connection. When we meet our future self in Chapter 1, it might have felt a little like imagination, almost like daydreaming. But this practice isn't just a mental trick, it has deep roots in neuroscience, psychology, and human behavior. Understanding the science behind it can make future self conversations not only more effective but more intuitive. The first piece of the puzzle is how our brains perceive time. Neuroscientists have found that the brain treats the future self almost like a stranger. When you imagine yourself 10 years from now, parts of your brain that process thoughts about other people, empathy, moral reasoning, social connection activate. In other words, your brain initially treats your future self as someone outside of yourself. This is why it's easy to ignore their needs or delay decisions that benefit the long term. You might think, I'll worry about that later, because in your mind, later me is almost a different person entirely. This is where self-continuity comes in. Self-continuity is the sense that who you are today is connected to who you will be tomorrow. Research shows that people with a stronger sense of self-continuity are more likely to save money, stick to healthy habits, and make long-term investments in their future. Simply put, when you feel connected to your future self, you treat them with care, just like you would a close friend. Identity theory also explains why future self conversations are so transformative. At its core, identity theory says that our behaviors are guided not just by external rewards but by who we perceive ourselves to be. You don't exercise or eat vegetables solely because it's good for you, you do it because it fits the story you tell about yourself. By vividly imagining your future self, you create a living identity, a version of you who has already made the choices you aspire to. The present self then has a blueprint to follow. Then there's the issue of short-term rewards. Humans are wired to prioritize immediate gratification. Evolutionarily, this made sense. Hunting a meal now was more important than planning for a year from now. But in modern life, this wiring can be a problem. We procrastinate, overspend, or skip steps that could improve our long-term happiness. Here, future self-visualization acts as a counterbalance. By giving your present brain a vivid, emotionally compelling picture of the future, you effectively trick it into valuing long-term rewards as if they were immediate. Even simple acts of writing a letter to your future self or imagining a conversation with them can change behavior. One fascinating study had participants age progressed in photos, digital renderings that made them look older, and then asked them to make financial decisions. Those who saw an older version of themselves saved more money for retirement than those who saw only current images. Seeing your future self creates empathy, urgency, and a concrete sense of responsibility. Neuroscience explains why this works. Engaging with your future self activates areas of the prefrontal cortex, which govern planning, decision-making, and impulse control. It also reduces activity in regions linked to immediate reward seeking. Essentially, connecting with your future self strengthens your internal executive coach. Over time, this neural shift makes it easier to make choices that feel uncomfortable today but rewarding tomorrow, exercising, learning a new skill, or saving for a long-term goal. Future self-thinking also rewires emotional responses. When you imagine future success, your brain experiences a mild version of the positive emotions you'll feel when you reach that goal. These emotional rehearsals make success feel achievable and desirable, not abstract or distant. Conversely, imagining negative outcomes can trigger constructive caution rather than panic. You begin to navigate decisions with clarity rather than anxiety. In short, the science is clear: the more vivid, consistent, and emotionally resonant your connection to your future self, the more likely you are to make choices that align with who you truly want to become. Future self connection is not fluff, it's a neural, psychological, and identity-based tool that transforms thought into action. By understanding why this works, you can begin to intentionally design conversations with your future self. The mind doesn't just imagine, it rehearses. And rehearsal shapes reality. In the next chapter, we'll explore the gap between who you are today and who you could be tomorrow, and learn strategies for closing it in meaningful, sustainable ways. Chapter 3: The Gap Between Who You Are and Who You Could Be. Every day, most of us live in a kind of tension. On one hand, we have our dreams, our ambitions, the version of ourselves we hope to become. On the other, we have our current reality, habits, routines, doubts, and limitations that feel all too familiar. The space between these two, your present self and your future self, is what psychologists call the identity gap. Understanding this gap is essential because it's where transformation begins. The identity gap is not a moral judgment. It's not saying you're failing at life, it's simply the distance between potential and practice. And here's the surprising part: most people underestimate how malleable that gap is. Your future self isn't a vague fantasy, it's a version of you that can be reached incrementally, if you know how to bridge the space. Think of it like a river. On one bank is who you are today, with all your habits, thoughts, and routines. On the opposite bank is who you want to be: confident, disciplined, calm, successful, or healthy. The gap can feel intimidating. But the bridge is already under construction. It's built one plank at a time through intentional action, reflection, and conversation with your future self. Visualization is one of the most powerful planks. Close your eyes and picture your future self in rich detail. Don't just imagine the external markers, appearance, possessions, or career milestones. See how they think, how they respond under stress, the values they prioritize, the way they speak to themselves. When you internalize this vision, your present self begins to adopt the attitudes and choices of that future self. This is more than daydreaming, it's a rehearsal for life. Journaling is another critical tool for narrowing the gap. A simple but effective exercise is to write letters back and forth between your present self and future self. Ask questions like, what habits do you wish I started today? Or, what challenges did you overcome that I should prepare for? Then write your future self's reply, imagining their voice with clarity and compassion. This practice externalizes the gap, making it tangible and actionable. Identity-based thinking is the next bridge plank. Most people approach change by focusing on actions. I need to exercise more, or I should save money. But action alone often fails because it's disconnected from identity. Instead, anchor your change in who you are becoming. Shift the focus from doing to being. I am someone who values health and movement. I am someone who makes wise financial decisions. When your actions align with identity, the gap between present and future self narrows naturally. Closing this gap also requires confronting the psychological resistance that arises in the process. Fear, doubt, and self-criticism often emerge when you attempt to act in ways your current self isn't used to. This is normal. The present self wants comfort, predictability, and familiarity, even if it comes at the cost of growth. The key is to treat the gap as a negotiation rather than a battle. Your future self doesn't demand perfection, they invite small, consistent steps that add up over time. Let's put this into a simple, practical framework. 1. Visualize your future self vividly, including thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. 2. Journal to clarify the steps and attitudes that bridge the gap. 3. Anchor identity by defining the story you want to live and making small choices that align with it. 4. Act with consistency, knowing that tiny habits compound into meaningful change. 5. Reflect and adjust, using your future self dialogue as a compass for corrections and encouragement. Here's an example. Suppose you want to become a confident public speaker. Your present self freezes at the thought of standing in front of a crowd. Your future self, however, has mastered the skill through gradual practice. By visualizing that version, journaling fears and solutions, and committing to micro habits, like speaking in front of a mirror or joining a small group, you steadily shrink the gap. Each practice session is a plank in the bridge to your future self. The gap may seem daunting at first, but it's also a space of incredible potential. Think of it as a field of opportunity, waiting for the seeds you plant today to grow. The more you engage with your future self through visualization, journaling, and identity-based thinking, the smaller that gap becomes. And as it narrows, the actions you take today start to feel natural rather than forced, intuitive rather than difficult. By the end of this chapter, the goal is simple: you should begin to see the gap not as a barrier, but as a pathway. A pathway that, with the right tools and mindset, leads directly from who you are now to the person your future self is waiting for you to become. Chapter 4: Conversations that change your direction. So far, we've explored who your future self is, why connecting with them works, and how to start narrowing the gap between who you are today and who you could be. Now it's time to make it practical. Chapter 4 is all about conversation, not with someone else, but with yourself. Specifically, with the version of you that already knows the outcomes you want, the wisdom you need, and the habits that will get you there. Think of these conversations as your personal GPS system. Without guidance, it's easy to wander, react to impulses, or settle for less than you're capable of. But when you speak with your future self, you gain clarity, motivation, and a grounded perspective. You start to see challenges not as obstacles, but as questions. What would my future self do in this situation? The first step is creating a safe mental space. Sit somewhere quiet, remove distractions, and imagine a calm, confident version of yourself. This isn't a judgmental critic or an idealized fantasy, it's a mentor who knows you intimately. Picture them clearly, their posture, their voice, their tone. The more concrete the visualization, the more impactful the conversation. Once you've met them in your mind, start small. Ask one simple question. What's the most important choice I can make today to help you tomorrow? Listen, not just with your ears, but with your mind. Answers may come as words, feelings, or sudden insights. This is your future self speaking. The clarity that emerges often surprises people because it bypasses the noise of day-to-day stress and taps into deeper priorities. Let's look at a sample dialogue. Present you: I feel stuck in my work. I don't know if I should take a risk and pitch a new idea. Future you: I understand the hesitation. Remember, calculated risks are how growth happens. Start by gathering information and building a small prototype. You don't have to leap blindly, just take the step that creates momentum. Present you: so I shouldn't quit my job today. Future you: not today. But begin laying the foundation. Every small action compounds. You'll thank yourself months from now for starting wisely, not impulsively. Notice how the conversation reframes fear into strategy. By externalizing the voice of wisdom, you separate decision-making from anxiety and instant emotion. It's not about eliminating fear, it's about consulting a higher perspective before acting. To make these conversations habitual, you can use prompts. Some examples. What habits should I strengthen today for the life I want tomorrow? What am I avoiding that my future self would urge me to face? If I could only accomplish one meaningful thing today, what would it be? How can I respond differently in this situation to align with the person I'm becoming? Scripts like these help your brain focus. Repetition strengthens the neural pathways between present action and future outcomes. Over time, these dialogues move from occasional exercises to automatic inner guidance. You'll start noticing subtle shifts in decision-making, priorities, and emotional responses. Another tool is journaling your conversations. Write down the dialogue as if your future self were sitting across from you. Seeing the conversation on paper reinforces the connection and allows you to reflect later. Sometimes, the act of writing clarifies answers that felt vague in your mind. Finally, remember, these conversations don't have to be long or formal. Even a minute or two of intentional dialogue can shift your perspective. The goal isn't perfection, it's alignment. Each conversation, however brief, nudges your present self toward choices your future self will appreciate. By practicing these conversations daily, you build a consistent feedback loop. Present decisions start aligning with long-term vision. Fear becomes a signal rather than a stop sign. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the direction of your life begins to change, not because you're forcing transformation, but because you're following the guidance of someone who already embodies it, your future self. Chapter 5: The Future Self Decision-Making Method. By now, you've met your future self, explored the science behind the connection, and practiced conversations that guide your choices. In this chapter, we'll take it a step further, a structured method for using your future self as a decision-making tool. This is not about wishful thinking or daydreaming, it's a practical framework for reducing impulsive choices, avoiding self-sabotage, and building habits that stick. The core idea is simple: before making a decision, pause and ask, what would my future self do in this situation? The power comes not from moral judgment, but from perspective. Your future self is emotionally wiser, experienced, and focused on long-term outcomes. Consulting them reframes decisions from short-term impulses to long-term alignment. Let's break the method into a step-by-step process. Step 1: Pause and center. Before responding to a situation, whether it's a financial choice, a work decision, or a personal challenge, take a moment to breathe and focus. Even a few seconds of stillness shifts your brain from reactive mode to reflective mode. This creates space for the voice of your future self to be heard. Step 2: Visualize your future self. Imagine them vividly. What are they wearing? How do they carry themselves? What tone of voice do they use when speaking to you? The more concrete the image, the more persuasive their guidance becomes. Remember, this is a version of you who has already navigated similar challenges successfully. Step 3: Ask a targeted question. Frame your question in a way that seeks practical wisdom, not abstract advice. Examples include: if I act on impulse, how will I feel about this tomorrow, a month, or a year from now? What choice would build the habits and identity I want? Which option aligns with the person I am becoming? The key is specificity. Vague questions get vague answers. Clear questions get actionable guidance. Step 4: Listen and reflect. This is the moment where intuition meets insight. Your future self may respond as a thought, a feeling, or even a sudden physical sensation, like a nudge in your chest or a sense of relief. This is not imagination for imagination's sake, it's your brain rehearsing decisions from a long-term perspective. Reflect honestly on what arises. Step 5. Decide and act. Now comes the crucial step: take action. Decisions without follow-through have no transformative power. Acting in alignment with your future self strengthens your neural pathways, reinforces identity-based habits, and gradually narrows the gap between who you are and who you want to become. Step 6. Review and adjust. Afterward, reflect. Did the decision honor your long-term goals? Did you resist the pull of short-term gratification? Over time, this reflective practice builds a feedback loop where your future self becomes a trusted internal advisor rather than an occasional exercise. Let's illustrate with a real-world scenario. Imagine you're tempted to spend a large amount of money on a luxury item you don't need. Present you: it's just one purchase. I deserve it. Future you: I understand the impulse. But remember the long-term goals we've set. Will this help us reach financial freedom or delay it? Present you: it feels urgent now, but I want security later. Future you: exactly. Save the money instead. Invest it. Every small choice compounds. You'll thank yourself later. Notice how consulting your future self transforms the decision from short-term desire to long-term strategy. It doesn't feel like restriction, it feels like alignment with who you are becoming. This method works across all areas of life: career, health, relationships, finances, and personal growth. The more consistently you practice, the more your present self internalizes the perspective of your future self. Over time, you won't need to consciously pause before every decision. Your future self mindset will become automatic, guiding your choices subtly, almost invisibly, yet profoundly. By the end of this chapter, the goal is clear: you now have a repeatable, actionable method for consulting your future self before making choices. Decisions become deliberate rather than reactive. Impulses lose power. Habits form naturally. And step by step, action by action, you build a life that your future self not only appreciates, but is proud of. Chapter 6: Transforming Habits Through Identity. Up to this point, you've learned how to connect with your future self, have meaningful internal conversations, and even seek their guidance before making big choices. Now we're moving into deeper territory: habits. But not ordinary, checklist-style habits. We're looking at habits that last because they're woven into who you believe yourself to be. These actions don't feel forced, they feel like natural extensions of the person you're becoming. Most people start habit change with outcome-based intentions: I need to lose 10 pounds, or I want to finish a book. Goals like these sound inspiring, but they often fall apart because they skip over the most important piece: identity. Habits aren't just repeated actions, they're reflections of your self-concept. When your behavior matches who you believe you are, your mind rewards you with a sense of alignment. When it clashes, you feel resistance, guilt, or discomfort. That's why identity-first habit building is so powerful. Rather than asking, "What should I do?" the better question is, "Who am I becoming?" Once you define that identity clearly, your habits become natural expressions of it, not tasks you must force yourself to complete. Take the desire to be healthier. Instead of the goal, "I'll work out 4 times per week," shift the focus to identity: I'm someone who values their body and enjoys staying active. Suddenly, movement becomes something you do because of who you are. Skipping exercise now feels subtly out of place because it contradicts that identity. Following through feels satisfying because it reinforces your internal story. Highly effective identity-driven habits tend to share 3 traits. 1. Clarity: the habit directly expresses the kind of person you want to be. 2. Consistency: small, steady actions slowly but surely anchor this identity. 3. Alignment with your future self: every habit becomes a step toward the version of yourself you envision. Here's another example: writing. Instead of thinking, "I want to publish a book," shift to being a writer. Begin with simple actions: write a paragraph daily, keep a journal, brainstorm ideas without worrying about perfection. The identity, "I am a writer," drives the behavior, not the other way around. Eventually the actions become nearly automatic, requiring far less motivation because they match your self-concept. To apply identity-based habit change, use this 3-part approach. Step 1. Define your future self. Be detailed. What do they value? How do they behave? Picture real routines, not vague traits. Step 2. Choose supporting habits. Pick small, repeatable behaviors that express this identity. They should be simple enough to stick with, yet meaningful enough to signal, "This is who I am." Step 3. Strengthen through repetition and reflection. Keep track of your wins, acknowledge your consistency, and reflect on how these actions reinforce your identity. Journaling, or communicating with your imagined future self, enhances this reinforcement. For instance, say your future self is financially wise. Build habits like weekly budget reviews, automatic savings contributions, or periodic micro-investments. Each act strengthens the identity: "I am someone who handles money responsibly." Over time, these behaviors feel instinctive because they reflect an internal truth, not an external rule. Identity-based habits also compound. Tiny actions accumulate and gradually reshape your beliefs, decision-making, and emotional responses. You begin thinking like the person you're becoming long before the external results fully show. Eventually, your routines feel effortless because they align with your self-image. And remember, transformation through identity is gradual. It unfolds through repeated choices where your actions line up with your future self. Every decision becomes a small investment in your personal narrative. Each aligned behavior strengthens the mental pathways that make change permanent. The core message of this chapter is simple: the most effective way to reshape your behavior is to reshape your identity. When your habits are rooted in who you believe you are, motivation becomes natural, decision-making becomes easier, and personal growth stops feeling like a struggle. It becomes your new normal. Chapter 7. Navigating Fear, Doubt, and the Inner Critic. Even with a clear vision of your future self and habits aligned with your identity, growth is rarely a smooth path. Fear, doubt, and the inner critic often show up as unwelcome companions. These voices are not mistakes or flaws, they're part of being human. The key is learning to recognize them, differentiate them from your true guidance, and respond in a way that honors your future self. Fear often masquerades as practical concern. It whispers things like, "What if I fail?" or "What if I'm not ready?" Doubt can sound like a skeptic sitting on your shoulder, questioning every plan: "Are you sure this is the right choice?" And the inner critic? That's the loudest voice of all, the one that tells you you're not enough, not capable, or not deserving of success. Left unchecked, these voices can paralyze you, keeping you stuck in habits, decisions, or routines that no longer serve you. The first step in navigating these voices is awareness. Recognize that fear, doubt, and the inner critic are separate from your future self. They belong to the present self, which is wired to seek comfort and minimize risk. Your present self's resistance is normal, it's protective, but it's often misaligned with your long-term goals. By identifying these voices, you create a gap between reaction and response. This gap is where your future self can step in. Future self-dialogue is especially powerful in moments of fear. For example, imagine you're hesitant to speak up in a meeting because you're afraid of looking foolish. Your present self says, "Stay quiet. Don't risk embarrassment." Your future self might respond, "I understand the fear." But the person you're becoming speaks with confidence and clarity. One small step today, sharing an idea, builds the courage and credibility that will serve you for years. You won't regret showing up. Notice how this reframes the situation. Fear is acknowledged, not denied, but it's placed in the context of long-term identity and goals. The result is not reckless courage, but deliberate action grounded in alignment with your future self. Another tool is naming and dialoguing with your inner critic. When self-criticism arises, pause and address it directly. "I hear you, inner critic. You're worried I might fail. Thank you for protecting me. But I'm choosing to act in alignment with my future self anyway." This approach softens the critic's grip without silencing it. You acknowledge its role, while asserting authority on behalf of your long-term vision. Mindfulness and journaling also play critical roles in managing fear and doubt. When anxiety arises, write down exactly what your present self is afraid of. Then, respond from your future self's perspective. Ask, "What would you advise me to do right now, knowing the outcome I want?" This practice externalizes fear, creates perspective, and strengthens the voice of wisdom over the voice of hesitation. It's also important to normalize discomfort. Growth rarely occurs in the comfort zone. The present self may resist because progress often feels uncomfortable. This is where future self conversations shine. They remind you that discomfort is temporary, but the rewards of alignment and identity are lasting. Each time you act despite fear, doubt, or criticism, you reinforce the neural pathways that make courageous, future-aligned behavior easier the next time. Finally, consider fear, doubt, and the inner critic as signals rather than obstacles. They highlight areas where your present self is vulnerable or unpracticed. By approaching them with curiosity, dialogue, and reflection, you turn these emotional responses into data points. You learn where your future self needs to guide you, and you strengthen the connection between present and future identity. By the end of this chapter, you should have a clear strategy, recognize fear and doubt, differentiate them from your future self, and respond with deliberate action that reinforces identity and long-term alignment. Navigating these voices is not about elimination, it's about transformation. The present self may resist, but the more consistently you act in alignment with your future self, the quieter the inner critic becomes, and the more confident, resilient, and wise you become in the process. Chapter 8: Designing Your Future Self Blueprint. By now, you've practiced connecting with your future self, navigated fear and doubt, and begun aligning your habits and decisions with the person you want to become. In this chapter, we're going to take it a step further, designing a comprehensive blueprint of your future self. This is where your vision becomes concrete, actionable, and personal, a living map that guides your daily choices. A blueprint is more than wishful thinking. It's a structured representation of the person you intend to become. It includes values, lifestyle, relationships, career, finances, health, and even spirituality. The goal is to answer a single powerful question: who exactly do I want to be? The clearer the answer, the more effectively your future self conversations, decisions, and habits can work together. Begin with values. These are the principles that define your future self. Ask yourself, what matters most in my life? Perhaps integrity, creativity, compassion, or growth. Values are anchors, they guide decision-making and give meaning to your actions. For example, if your future self values learning, opportunities to acquire new skills or knowledge become naturally compelling. Next, define your lifestyle. This includes daily routines, environment, and personal habits. Visualize a day in the life of your future self. What time do they wake up? How do they structure their day? How do they balance work, rest, and play? Imagine the details vividly. The more specific your picture, the more your present self can make choices that reflect it. Relationships are another crucial component. Ask, what kinds of people surround my future self? Think about the type of friends, mentors, and partners who inspire growth and reflect your values. Strong social alignment accelerates transformation because your environment begins to reinforce the identity you're building. Career and financial goals are next. Picture the kind of work your future self does and the financial practices they follow. Be concrete. Define not only your job title or income, but the habits and decisions that create security, freedom, and satisfaction. Your future self's career is a reflection of identity and discipline, not just ambition. Health and well-being are equally important. Imagine the energy, strength, and vitality your future self embodies. What daily routines, exercise habits, and nutritional choices support that state? How does your mental and emotional health flourish? Designing these habits now makes them easier to implement consistently. Finally, consider spirituality or purpose, whatever that means for you. Your future self should feel a sense of meaning and direction. This could involve mindfulness, meditation, service, creative expression, or connection with a larger vision. Purpose anchors your identity and makes transformation feel worth the effort. Once you've explored these areas, create a future self vision map. This can be written, drawn, or even visualized mentally. Break it into categories: values, habits, relationships, career, finances, health, and purpose, and list specifics under each. Include both the tangible and intangible aspects, the routines, the emotional qualities, the mindset, and even the energy or presence of your future self. Here's a brief example. Values: integrity, curiosity, growth, empathy. Lifestyle: early riser, structured work blocks, daily reading, consistent reflection. Relationships: mentors for guidance, supportive friends, family time prioritized. Career and finances: freelance consulting with predictable income, regular investments, continuous skill development. Health, morning exercise, balanced diet, 8 hours of sleep, stress management. Purpose/spirituality, weekly reflection, volunteering, pursuing creative passions. The act of designing this blueprint has immediate benefits. It clarifies what your future self stands for, creates a mental target for habits and decisions, and strengthens the connection between present and future identity. Every time you pause to consult your future self, this blueprint becomes the reference point, guiding you through uncertainty and temptation. By the end of this chapter, your future self is no longer abstract. They are a living, detailed model, complete with behaviors, habits, values, and aspirations. With this blueprint, the choices you make today are no longer guesses, they are deliberate steps on a pathway toward the person you want to become. It's your roadmap, your anchor, and your internal compass all in one. Chapter 9, Becoming the Person Your Future Self Will Thank. By this point, you've met your future self, navigated inner obstacles, and designed a detailed blueprint of who you want to become. Now comes the crucial step, translating that vision into action. This chapter is about living in alignment with your future self, every single day, through practical, intentional behaviors that compound over time. Transformation is not about grand gestures or sudden breakthroughs. It's about consistent, small actions that reinforce identity. Your future self isn't looking for perfection, they're looking for consistency. Every choice, no matter how small, is a vote for the person you want to become. Each vote counts, and over time, these decisions create momentum. Start with microhabits. These are tiny, repeatable actions that reinforce your future self's identity. They're often so small that they feel almost effortless, yet their impact is profound. For example, if your future self is healthy, start with 1 glass of water in the morning or a 5-minute stretch. If your future self is a writer, commit to writing 1 paragraph a day. If your future self is financially responsible, track 1 expense each evening. The key is to start small and scale gradually. Microhabits remove resistance and make transformation sustainable. They also create positive feedback loops. The satisfaction of following through reinforces your identity and motivates future action. Next, structure your environment to support alignment. Your habits are easier to maintain when your surroundings nudge you in the right direction. Want to eat healthier? Keep fruits and vegetables visible and snacks out of sight. Want to read more? Keep books on your nightstand or phone. Want to focus at work? Minimize distractions and create dedicated spaces for deep work. Your environment is a silent partner in habit formation, make it work for you rather than against you. Daily reflection and future self dialogue are also essential. At the end of each day, pause and ask, what actions did I take today that my future self would thank me for? Where did I act out of impulse or fear instead of alignment? What can I adjust tomorrow to better serve the person I'm becoming? Journaling these reflections strengthens the connection between present and future self. It's not about judgment, it's about calibration. Over time, this practice helps you make decisions in real time that reflect your long-term vision. Another critical element is accountability. You can hold yourself accountable in multiple ways, sharing your goals with trusted friends, creating public commitments, or setting reminders that prompt future self-reflection. External accountability reinforces internal accountability and keeps you moving forward, even when motivation wanes. Consistency over intensity is the mantra here. 1 hour of focused, aligned action daily will always outperform sporadic bursts of effort. Transformation is the result of thousands of small choices, each reflecting the person you are becoming. Your future self doesn't need radical change today, they need the accumulation of deliberate actions over time. Finally, embrace compassion and patience. Growth is rarely linear. There will be missteps, moments of resistance, and days when fear or doubt feels louder than wisdom. The difference between stagnation and transformation is not perfection, it's resilience. When you falter, consult your future self, it's okay. Start again. The bridge is built 1 plank at a time. By integrating microhabits, environmental design, reflection, accountability, and patience, you begin to live each day in alignment with your future self. Decisions feel less like struggle and more like natural expressions of identity. Over time, your daily actions compound into meaningful change, shaping a life that feels authentic, intentional, and deeply satisfying. By the end of this chapter, the principle is clear: the person your future self will thank is created not by massive, occasional efforts, but by countless small, deliberate choices made consistently. Every aligned action is a bridge plank, every reflection is a guiding signpost, and every habit is a thread weaving the fabric of the life you're destined to live. Chapter 10: Living in Alignment, the 90-Day Future Self Challenge. By now, you've done the inner excavation, you've envisioned your future self, confronted resistance, crafted a clear roadmap, and begun weaving new habits into your daily rhythm. This chapter is where everything shifts from insight to embodiment. The 90-Day Future Self Challenge turns intention into action, inviting you to live as the person you're becoming, not someday, but now. The challenge is straightforward, but it calls for commitment, mindfulness, and honest self-observation. 90 days can feel fleeting or daunting, yet the length isn't what matters, your devotion to the process is. This isn't about flawless execution, it's about alignment. Every day becomes an opportunity to choose behaviors your future self would applaud. The challenge centers around 3 core pillars: daily dialogue, aligned habits, and consistent reflection. Together, they create a reinforcing cycle that propels your growth. Pillar 1: Daily Future Self Dialogue. Spend a few intentional minutes each morning or night connecting with your future self. Ask questions such as: what decision today would leave you proud? Where might fear or distraction show up, and how should I meet it? What small action today expresses who I'm becoming? Record your answers or speak them aloud. The magic lies in repetition. By revisiting this dialogue daily, you strengthen the bridge between who you are and who you're becoming, making aligned choices more accessible, even on low motivation days. Pillar 2: Habit Alignment. Choose 3 to 5 foundational habits that reflect your future identity. Keep them simple and sustainable. Track them daily. Examples include morning movement or exercise, journaling or self-reflection, intentional planning for personal or professional goals, nourishing food choices, dedicated practice to a craft or skill. Remember, consistency outweighs intensity. Small, repeated behaviors compound into meaningful change over 90 days. These habits are not chores, they're identity statements. Pillar 3: Reflection and Adjustment. Each evening, pause to review your day with curiosity rather than judgment. Did my actions today reflect my future self? Where did fear, impulse, or distraction take the lead? What can I adjust tomorrow to realign? This practice closes the gap between intention and execution. It helps you recalibrate quickly, extract wisdom from missteps, and acknowledge your wins. Capturing these reflections in writing deepens self-awareness and reinforces future-oriented thinking. The 90-day journey also tests resilience. You'll have days where doubt, avoidance, or resistance feels louder than your vision. In those moments, return to your future self dialogue. Ask, what would the person I'm becoming choose right now? Acting from that identity, especially when it's hard, rewires your default responses. By the end of the 90 days, the shift becomes undeniable. Actions that once required effort start to feel natural. Your micro-habits become automatic. Fear transforms from a barrier into a signal for growth. Most importantly, the distance between your present self and your future self begins to dissolve. The 90-Day Future Self Challenge is more than a framework, it's a bridge that carries you from insight to lived transformation. When you commit and honor the pillars, you don't just envision your future self, you begin becoming them. And when you arrive, they'll know exactly who to thank.